Hello, I'm Andy Agafangelo. I'm carrying out this video interview of Sue Flood in my capacity as Chair of the Secretariat Committee to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services. I am also, however, the founder of the Transparency Task Force, which provides the Secretariat to the APPG. So thank you very much indeed for having this conversation with me. As you know, the conversation is being video recorded. The video recording will be placed on the APPG's website and will raise awareness of it through social media. You're carrying out this conversation with me, Sue, on the basis that you have already provided a written submission to the APPG's Call for Evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority. Could I invite you, please, first of all, Sue, to tell us about yourself and outline just briefly to begin with how you came to interact with the FCA. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Andy. My main domicile residence is in the UK, as per the address given on my forms, but I also had a residency in Spain. So whilst I was in Spain in 2011, I saw an advert, a well-known UK FSA, FCA authorised regulated entity offering financial planning advice. The FSA, FCA regulated firm was AES, and the individual employed by them with whom represented them to provide that financial planning advice was Paul Clark, who held himself out to be dual qualified FSA, FCA authorised advisor with European passporting rights. At the time, I did look back on the FSA, FCA website to check that indeed AES International were on the register and were authorised to provide services to consumers. The FSA, FCA website gave no warning, no guidance to consumers to suggest that if dealing with AES International, they needed to consider jurisdictional issues or any other issues of concern.
Thank you, Sue. Question number 2. What did you invest in and when and what went wrong?
The advice received from Paul Clark of AES was to move our pension monies from, in my case, the BBC final salary scheme to another UK pension scheme, which was registered with HMRC and the pension regulator. And it would also provide a better rate of return. Paul Clark of AES explained that I would be able to qualify for a tax-free lump sum of money, and this would be part of the transfer from my final salary scheme into the proposed pension scheme. At no time did Paul Clark, when he provided this advice, indicate that by following his advice, there would be any jurisdictional issues or that I would be in contravention of any HMRC tax regulations. So on confirming we wish to proceed with the transfer, as advised by him, I started to have some misgivings about going ahead with the transaction. I tried to raise the concerns with Paul Clark to obtain some clarification and hopefully a little bit of reassurance from him that my concerns were not valid, really. Instead, Paul fobbed me off and suggested that I raise the complaint with AES head office, which I duly tried to do. On getting no satisfaction from AES International head office, I immediately contacted a lawyer in both Spain and in the UK to explain that I needed urgent advice and assistance to stop this transfer of funds from my BBC final salary scheme, and if too late, to at least get them to take some action and request the receiving new pension scheme to return these monies immediately to the BBC. So I and my lawyer tried to contact, and it did indeed, contact the UK administrative firm directly, who were acting on behalf of the trustees of the receiving pension scheme to return these monies. This contact and request was all made prior to the government's appointment of Dariada trustees by the pension regulator. That would have been around the 31st of May 2011. The monies were not returned, and I found out eventually through Dalriada trustees and my own investigations that these pension monies were indeed invested in unregulated entities and they paid huge commissions and fees to advisors and third parties, all of which was not in my control, obviously. The registered pension scheme turned out to be a defined contribution scheme, which was registered with HMRC and the pension regulator, which meant that whilst monies would have gone into a trust account controlled by the trustees, it was not a segregated pension fund, but to be treated as a common trust. But that was all found after the event.
Thank you again, Sue. And question number 3, Sue, if you're happy to mention it, how much money did you invest, and how much of that money do you have left?
My final pension transfer from the BBC was approximately 150. Both myself and my partner took this, so his was about 130, so it's like 250 approximately. It went to the new pension trustees, which was Lancaster Pension Scheme in the UK, which was registered both with HMRC and the pension regulator. I can't tell you a figure because currently Dalriada trustees actually are unable to inform me how much, if any, is left now after the 11 years of legal wranglings and tracking where the money went, both UK and overseas. And in order to lay claim to have my pension monies and that of other victims returned, we didn't invest it. It just was put into a common trust. So I don't know, Andy. It was all beyond our understanding.
Thank you again. Number 4, what was supposed to happen and what actually happened as far as you know?
I got professional qualified financial planning advice, and the reason to do that was to ensure that my pension monies were in the right place, and if not, where should I consider moving my pension pot in order to earn a better return. Ultimately, Paul Clark advised me to transfer into the new UK Lancaster scheme, and I've been informed by Dalriada that my pension monies, along with hundreds of other victims, went to pay exorbitant commission fees, the purchase of a fraudulent valued piece of land in Cyprus, and Freedom Bay, highly illiquid investment that went into liquidation in the Caribbean, I believe.
Thank you. And question number 5, Sue, what, if anything, do you believe the FCA could have done that may have prevented you from allegedly being scammed in the first place?
I think the FCA should have provided clear guidance for consumers for whom they are in existence to protect on their website, to state what jurisdiction issues there may be when instructing entities authorised by them who purport to be operating out of the UK and other EU countries. These are entities that were advertising both in the UK and abroad openly about these services they could provide to consumers whilst under the banner and the protection of the FSA and the FCA.
Thank you.
I mean, today I've interacted with the FCA and asked for links for these guidelines that existed from 2010 to now. They've been unable to provide those links that demonstrate and explain to consumers what they needed to consider and be aware of before they instructed a financial advisor authorised by them to operate in the UK and abroad, so that the consumer understood that they may not necessarily be covered by the FCA financial protection scheme should anything go wrong. I mean, when dealing with one of their regulated dual passporting firms, it's not there. It wasn't.
And question number 6, what interaction have you had with the FCA about what happened?
Back in 2011, having instructed a lawyer who recommended I contact the FCA about the time Dalriada was appointed, around 31st of May 2011. I contacted their hotline to explain what had happened. I provided the hotline with the information they asked for. I waited to hear back as to what action they might take. I didn't hear from them again until really later, when I started working with the Transparency Task Force. This included a meeting organised by Andy and Margaret Snowden OBE. I think you might remember we attended a meeting back at the FCA who
Sure.
stated they would look into the pension transfer and investigate. What followed, the investigation team came to my house, conducted a four-hour interview or more, actually, with myself and others, including an NHS nurse victim whose money had gone into the same scam as mine. The investigation team, whilst at my house, also went through all of my paperwork, took copies of mine and the victim. Following that visit, the investigation team requested that I continue to provide them sort of information to a named contact person at the FCA. I continued to do that for about 2 years. So from then to date, we've not had any communication from that investigation team, to explain what has been done with that information that I and others provided. A lot of time and effort by myself and others, you, the NHS nurse, in providing the FCA investigation team with that information. I found that quite difficult and stressful. And I was relying what happened to me in 2011, and no time during this period was I even offered victim support, or no support.
Thank you. Question number 7. How well or badly do you think the FCA have performed in your case?
I believe the FSA, FCA have failed abysmally towards myself as a consumer by not providing any guidance that could easily be understood by those, let's say, average people who don't deal on a daily basis with the financial advisors and governing regulations and legislation, which is what now appears to be extremely complex. I mean, this is why consumers like myself seek professional regulated advice for help, which we pay for, in this instance, life savings.
Thank you. Number 8, Sue. What do you believe the FCA could have done better once they were aware that there was a problem?
Fundamentally, I believe that the FCA demonstrated over the years that they're incapable of taking the appropriate regulatory action due to their complete lack of understanding as to what the actual problem was that was happening to myself and hundreds of thousands of other consumers who ended up being scam victims. Victims like myself and others, along with regulated bodies, e.g. the pension regulator, tried in 2011 to 2013 to explain to the FCA what the issues were in respect of, for example, AES, and some of the masterminds behind the transfers of pension money. Stephen Ward and Premier Pension Transfers UK, having had those warnings from the TPR and agreed to take action in respect of AES, it was found later, in fact, they did no such thing.
Question number 9. What would you say about the FCA's effectiveness and timeliness in taking action to protect consumers?
In 2011, following my contact and others, the FCA have taken no action to obtain redress for the loss of our pension monies, stop the guilty parties from continuing to operate and earn vast sums of money, duping consumers all under the nose of the FCA. Therefore, I conclude that the FCA are completely ineffective in a role as the regulator and have failed miserably. You have only to read the papers documenting all the FCA regulatory failures on LCF and Greensill.
Question number 10. How helpful has the FCA been to you and others affected in securing redress from the alleged guilty parties and in prosecuting or banning them so they can't do it again?
The FCA had done nothing, and those guilty parties have continued to operate since 2011.
What are your thoughts on whether the FCA lacks the powers that it needs, or conversely, that it doesn't make good use of the powers that it already has?
As they've not used any powers to address the issues mentioned or provided any form of redress for myself or other victims, I'm unable to comment further as to whether they have the necessary powers to carry out their function.
In general terms, Sue, how would you describe what it's been like dealing with the FCA?
From a victim's perspective, it's been extremely stressful and disappointing, as they failed to grasp really since 2011 what the issues were, and that of a victim of financial fraud, I needed support. The contact with the FCA has generally been one way, in which they ask for information, which is time consuming to get that, provide that, and then they leave you in this black hole, never to return and shed a light on what's actually being done by them. If anything, I mean, if someone has been victimised and lost their pension pot and faces financial ruin and therefore extremely vulnerable, I feel that the FCA just do not provide the support that's needed for dealing with consumers who report these problems of this nature. They've effectively failed miserably the very people that they were created to protect.
And next question, Sue, number 13. What is your perception of the culture of the FCA, and what do you think about it?
At both board and senior management level of the FSA and the FCA, it appears to be a revolving door, a boys' club. Below these levels, it seems that the operational staff are struggling to carry out their regulated function, as there's no clear, effective leadership and a sense of direction on how to apply their regulatory mandate.
Question number 14, Sue. What do you think about the possibility of conflict of interest issues at the FCA?
As mentioned above, really, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Number 15. Have you ever complained officially about the FCA? If so, to whom and what happened?
You must be joking, given that it's taken me so many years for me to get the FCA to recently consider that they may have made an error and that they may need to investigate and review the information provided to them following the meetings we had and the meeting I had, the investigation. So nearly 8 years plus from where I first approached them, making complaints about them, which was a non-starter. I've had more success with other regulatory and parliamentary members in power in the recent years who realise that many victims have actually been scammed. The effort and sheer exhaustion to finally get these MPs on board has been monumental. I've very little faith. Had I made a complaint, it would have actually registered with anyone that would have considered taking up the issue, Andy.
Thank you, Sue. Question number 16. Overall, what has been the consequences to you and your family as a result of what happened?
In 2011, following the realisation that all of my pension monies, our pension monies, may have been lost, I suffered a mental breakdown. The damage to my family can never be repaid, never. And I still struggle with guilt for that now. I approached the FSA, the FCA in 2011 to try to get that help, to try to get some support, redress, justice, given the financial consequences of this pension scam that I suffered, which were and still are at no time did they provide me or any other victim that I know of with support.
Question number 17. So if you could change 3 things about the FCA, what would they be?
I have mentioned above in, I think, points 13 and 14, There needs to be a drastic change within the culture and the day-to-day operation of the FCA in how it conducts itself. Until this happens, consumers like myself will be failed, and all trust in the FCA as a consumer will cease to exist. The FCA failed to regulate and act swiftly. It's been clearly documented, none more explicitly than in the recent findings reviews regarding LCF and others.
Number 18, what positives are there about the FCA that you'd like to comment on?
The contact that I did make and the team that I provided information to were always helpful and always polite.
Number 19, do you believe there should be spot checks by the FCA on regulated and or unregulated entities, perhaps similar to the spot checks by VAT inspectors?
It's my understanding that it's always been part of the FCA function to carry out spot checks on all registered regulated entities and unregulated entities, hence why they have an authorised business unit and an unauthorised business unit that exists.
Number 20, the FCA is undertaking a transformation project. Do you have any comments to make about that?
Given my comments during this interview, and the only additional suggestion is to disband the FCA and start again. If fundamental lessons are not learned, the spending millions to restart is likely to be a waste of money and not provide consumers with a much needed trust in a regulator who has teeth to regulate and protect them.
Thank you. Number 21, and this is the final question, Sue. Are there any other comments that you would like to make?
For a regulator who purports to exist to protect the consumer, they have no real understanding of consumer needs and those of victims. It's a shame they don't realise just how much they have facilitated crime and allowed it to flourish. They also act like a secret service instead of a consumer-led facility.
Sue Flood, thank you very much indeed for providing your video testimony today for the APPG on personal banking and fairer financial services call for evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority, and also for providing your written submission, both of which will be available on the APPG's website. Sue, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you to the team at the Transparency Task Force for all your help and support. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thanks, Sue. Thank you very much.